All right, welcome back. We are back to the portrait that we had used before because if you remember, we still had some unfinished business when it came to the retouching part because I had told you that time we will be taking care of something more advanced technique called as frequency separation, which is used to smoothen out the skin and the tones. So let's see how to do that. Now, first of all, a lot of people think because this technique is so popular in the Photoshop world, a lot of people think, and it's fairly technical, okay, as you're going to see. A lot of people think it can't be done in GIMP. But the answer to that is not only can it be done in GIMP, it's actually, as you're going to find out, it's more intuitive and actually easier to do it in GIMP than it is in Photoshop, okay? So if you've done any of my retouching courses, Photoshop courses, and there I pretty much in all of them teach this technique, okay? So if you've done those, you're actually going to see a big difference because it's more convenient here in GIMP. But I'm going to teach this in such a way that I'm assuming you don't even know what frequency separation is. So we're going to start right from scratch. So the first thing that I want to do at this point is I just open that XCF file. So this is the project document. We can see all our layers. I can definitely start working from right now. But usually when there's so many layers piling up, I like to just flatten it out to one particular layer. Because anyway, I have the insurance of having all this saved as an XCF file, okay? It just puts less stress on your system. I do this in Photoshop also all the time. So right now what I can do is I can just right click and I can just hit flatten image, and that is just going to turn everything into one, okay? But if you're following this approach, yes, it's easier on your system, then make sure after every milestone you are saving it as a project document, okay? Now what we're going to do is let's try to understand what exactly is frequency separation, okay? Because a lot of people think it's just you blur the skin and you make it smooth. No, that's not frequency separation, even though the final result may look like that, okay? So frequency separation is actually just about evening out the tones that you get in the shot. What do I mean by that? So you can see here, okay, that this is the highlight from the softbox, the light, and this is the transition into the shadow part. Okay, so it's kind of this is specular highlight, very strong, and it's moving like this. But you can see if I zoom in, it is okay because of course I'm using a softbox, so it is okay. But the larger the source of light you use, that means if I had used a larger softbox, this transition would have been even smoother. So we're kind of trying to mimic that kind of a transition and make the overall portrait look really smooth. So if you can even out these transitions from highlights to shadows, you make the portrait really smooth. You can again see here, right? Pretty strong. We need to kind of spread it out. Think of it like that. Okay, that's what gives the smooth look to the skin. Now, the mistake that a lot of beginners make at this point is they simply blur these transitions or these tones. Okay, let me show you an example for this. So let's say if I was to just go here in the tool box, remember the same box that we used to get to the blur sharpen tool. There's also something called a smudge. This is a great way to just show what I mean here, okay? If you take smudge, you'll get this brush, and what this does, it kind of mixes whatever you run this on. So just see here. So if I run this, you see, it starts to kind of mix those tones, right? See. Just for this right now set on something very strong. I'm just deliberately trying to show you something you should not do, okay? So yeah, now this definitely looks smooth, but if I zoom in, just see the difference. We've lost all the texture. That's why you simply just don't blur out the skin. It's just going to look like plastic. It's never going to look real, okay? So this is not how you even out or smoothen the skin. So what is the correct way? So let me hit undo. What we need to do is, since texture disappearing is the problem, we need to actually find a way to separate out the texture from the tones so that when we do even out or blur the tones to get that smooth look, we still have our texture on a separate layer which is preserved and it is not harmed in any way, and it is just enabled on top of that blurred look. That's why this technique is called as frequency separation, because what we do here is we create two layers, and on them, one of them deals with the colors and tones where we blur out things, and another one is separated out into the texture. Texture and color and tones have different frequencies, okay? So when it comes to the pixels and all these things, and that's why we're separating out these frequencies, and that's why it's called frequency separation. So now the next question is, hopefully you've understood the concept. The next question is, how do we exactly do this process? So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're not going to work on the original as always. So we're going to just duplicate this particular layer, this. Now we have this copy, and I'm going to call this, just going to double click on it, though it's not necessary. I'm going to call this color and tone. And similarly, soon we are going to create one more layer, which is going to be called as the texture layer. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do on the color and tone layer is that we just want to blur this face in such a way that we actually cannot see the texture. Okay, because remember, this layer has a different purpose. It's just for color and tones. It should not have the texture. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, either we can use the smudge tool just like I showed you, but that's too much work. Okay, we can simply do this by one click by applying a filter. Okay, so we are going to go to filters with, make sure this layer is selected. We're going to go to filters, we're going to go to blur, and then we're going to hit Gaussian blur. Now you're going to get this size X and size Y sliders. These are just the axis, don't worry. Okay, if you increase this value, it's going to keep putting more and more blur. So you can see here like this. Okay, it's just blurring the photograph. Now the question is, how much blur should you apply? So remember, what are we trying to get rid of in this particular layer? We're trying to get rid of the texture here. So if we zoom in, all we have to do is keep increasing this till the time we don't see this fine texture. Okay, so let's say we increase it just very conservatively. So now let's go slightly back. Okay, can we still see the texture? Yeah, I mean, just zoom in, sorry, and just notice this. Okay, yeah, a bit of it is still remaining. That means we can slightly increase it. Okay, and now I think this is fine. Now we can't really see any of the fine texture. Maybe just a bit here. That's still fine. Okay, so this much is fine, because it's okay to be a bit conservative, but don't go too high. Okay, because the problem then is that it'll get so blurred out that even the colors and tones might be considered as texture. So even these large parts might be considered as texture. So you don't want to do that. Just the fine texture should be hidden. So we've been able to do that. Okay, so we're going to zoom out, and I think, yeah, that looks good. Just devoid of that fine texture. Now is the next step. We need to create one more layer, which is actually going to just be for the texture. So how do we do this? Well, this is where in GIMP, actually, it's way, way easier than in Photoshop. In Photoshop, this requires the next step that is coming for texture. It does require a bit of work. Okay, GIMP has actually made it very easy. All you have to do is, with this layer, okay, just change its blending mode first. Okay, so what we need to tell GIMP is that there's a very handy option in GIMP when it comes to these blending modes, which is called as grain extract. So that's it. It's just, we're literally asking GIMP that from this image, extract anything like grainy, just like texture like. Okay, so if we hit this, just see this. Now we're able to see all that nice texture. You see, it's coming on like this. Right now it's giving us that gray look. Don't worry, we're going to do something about that. But you can see all over, even her hands here, we have this nice texture. Now all we need to do is, we need to preserve this on a separate layer and get rid of this grayish look that we are seeing. Okay, so what we're going to do is, now that we are seeing something like this, there's another handy option in GIMP, which is that whatever you're seeing in front of you, that means whatever your eyes are seeing right now, you can actually turn that into a brand new layer. So if I right click here, you get this option which says new from visible. So that means GIMP create a new layer from whatever is visible to my eye right now. What is visible? All this grayish texture. No problem. Just create a new layer for me. So hit this and it comes on a separate layer. Okay. Now what we can do is, we can simply go here, the last one. We don't need to now have this grain extract. This job is done. We can set this back to normal. Okay. For this color and tone. His job was just to get the grain extract thing done. Now we have it on a separate layer. Now we are simply left with one task, which is, yes, we know we've got, let's rename this our texture here. Okay. Now we just need the last step, which is we need to get rid of this grayish look. We just need to merge these two together. So this has color and tone, this has texture, and ultimately this is going to give us the original. Let's say we can call this the original, okay? So how do we do that for this last step? Since now this is on a new layer, we can just simply go again to the modes, and this time, like a cousin of grain extract is grain merge, okay? So I can just hit grain merge, and there you go. Now, what you're seeing is a combination of texture and color and tone. Should point out at this point, and I do this in my Photoshop courses also, if you're doing frequency separation for the first time, and you probably, let's say you're not fully understanding the concept, like, okay, Kush, I'm kind of getting it, but not fully, it's not necessary. For a long time, when I started out editing, and I'm talking about doing professional shoots for people and applying this technique on their portraits, I simply mugged this whole process, like simply by heart. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? A lot of photographers believe you always have to know the concept, understand everything. No. Final result is what matters, okay? So if you're not fully understanding, just learn it by heart. That's it. You can literally, like a robot, repeat this process every time, and eventually you'll also understand it, okay? So now we've been able to do that. So let's just see this, okay? So if I hide the texture layer, we have the blurred look, which is for colors and tones. This was, of course, the original, but now a combination. So let's hide the original, okay? And let's actually enable color and tone. And now do this. This is exactly the same as our original, because just see, if I hide these and enable the original, exactly the same. So see, no difference when I do this. Right? So we have been able to now separate these two things out. Now we move on to the next step. Since we have that peace of mind, the texture is preserved here, we can pretty much do anything on this particular layer without affecting the texture. So let's start blurring now those tones out. Right? So to blur these tones out, again, you can go on to the smudge tool like we did before. Okay. Make sure you're on color and tone. And this time, just see the difference. Okay. If I just start running this, can you see? This looks much better this time, right? Because you can see that texture is not going anywhere. That is coming from here. But if I was to hide this, then we get that same look again. Okay. So this is where the texture is helping us. But again, I'm going to undo this because I don't like to use the smudge tool. If you want, you can. Okay. If you like to play around with that, you can. What I like to do is I like to use again the Gaussian blur for this. It's much, much better. So how do we do this? Okay. We are first of all going to require our selection tools. This is why I'm covering this after the section on selections. So what we do is we figure out first of all, what is the area which needs that softening of the transition? For example, let's say this area. And then we just basically select that area and blur it. I find this to be better. So just see how this works. So right now I've got my free select tool. Okay, that means I can literally draw any selection. So let me just do that. Let's say this is the first area I want to work with. So let's say I draw like a selection like this. Okay. Remember, we need to close the selection and we have now a selection. Now what we can do is if we go to filter, we go to blur, and if we hit Gaussian blur, just see what happens here. Okay, you can change the size like this. Can you see? The more blur you give, the more even the tones become. See. But also don't go too much. Like for example, you don't really want to go too high, but till the time you feel, yeah, it's smoothing out. Maybe I feel something like this is fine. Okay. And also one more thing you want to do at this point is that these edges of the selection can't be hard. Otherwise you'll actually see like this difference in the area where you haven't applied the blur and the normals and where you have applied. Okay. So how can you, so once I hit OK, what you can do here is that when you're using this selection tool, okay, you can, like once I hit this, actually I had already done it, but for you this, when you just hit on the selection tool, under this tool options, remember this, we've been seeing this a lot. Now this is showing us free select. Make sure this feather edges is like set to a higher radius. Usually by default, it can be set to something like really low. Just keep increasing it till the time you don't see any hard edges on where you've stopped it. Okay. For example, in my case, this was around 41%. Okay. So you need to actually do this before you've done it for the first time. I just forgot it that time. But just make sure that radius is set to higher so that it kind of makes this transition at the edges very, very soft. Okay. And now I'm just going to get rid of this selection. Remember our shortcut, Shift Control Command A. Just, oops. All right, so let's just see the before and after. So can you see? It's just got rid and made all those tones really smooth. But the only thing with this is that, yeah, maybe it's a bit of a slower process because you're kind of doing it in parts, whereas with the smudge tool, you can probably do it faster. Or if you don't want to be too accurate, even with this, you can like cover larger areas in one go also. It's not like you have to just select something small. Okay, so sometimes when I'm in a bit of hurry, so like what I can do, for example, is that instead of like just a small area like this, even like select something bigger. Okay, and like something like this, and even this, okay, will produce a lot of difference. Now you don't have to always go to filter, then go to blur. You can also hit this shortcut which says repeat Gaussian blur. So this is going to repeat this, the Gaussian blur at the same value as what we used before, and there's a shortcut for it, so you don't even have to go and click, which is Control or Command plus F. So the moment I've drawn this selection, I don't need to go here and again. Okay, I can just hit Control or Command plus F and just see, just applies it. Now, can you see the mistake I've done here? It looks very blurred. Something has gone wrong. Just see which layer am I on. I'm on the texture layer. I don't want to blur the texture. So I'm going to actually undo this, make sure I hit the color and tone layer, and now Control and Command F. Now, can you see the difference? Preserved the texture. Okay. And since the edges are soft, because of this, you're not even noticing anything on the edges. Okay. So again, I'm just going to hit that shortcut to get rid of this. Let's zoom out a bit. I'm sorry, there are some dogs barking outside my house. Hope it's not causing too much of an issue. Try to be a bit loud, right? Okay, so I think this is looking fine. So, but can you see now the issue? That's if you see this part just starts to look a bit fake, right? Let's be honest. Why? Because again, I did this in bulk. Think of it like this, right? That's why I told you I like to go in small steps, but I just wanted to show you that it can be done. So let's see the before and after. Can you see? Yes. So if you've gone like small cases, okay, correct this, then this, just looks more real. That's why I go in smaller parts, okay? But that's okay, no issues at all. In fact, towards the end, I'm going to be showing you that this also completely is under your control. It's going to be a completely non-destructive process. After I finish everything, if I feel this is too much, I can easily correct this even after I've finished this process of frequency separation, okay? And in fact, you should be able to kind of guess right now because you've already seen before in this course how that can be done. So you should start thinking, what is Kush talking about, okay? Also, let's just do it for the nose because this highlight is pretty strong. So anytime I observe like a specular highlight like this, something which is too shiny, definitely on that area, I use this. I'm just going to draw right here where the transition is and finish this and Control or Command F. Okay, now can you see this time I hit Control and Command F, but it kind of discolored this area. Now is the time that I can just hit undo. That means that last value which is working here is not working here. So we might have to this time revisit our filter, Gaussian blur, and this time maybe for this area we need to select a different value. Okay, remember because we were repeating the value for last time. Okay, so it may not work always. So maybe something like this is working here better, right? So something like 22. I can hit OK. Shift Control Command A. See the before and after. Yeah, now even the nose, can you see, just spreads out that highlight like it kind of is mimicking, like using, let's say, something like a 135 centimeter softbox. That's why you see those photographers using huge softboxes. I have actually the softbox. I didn't use it for this shoot, okay? So now I think I'll just do this in bulk because my point right now is kind of to move fast. Otherwise, I probably would have divided the forehead and done it twice, but I think this is fine. Maybe we can select as much. To hit Control Command F. Yeah, that looks good. Get rid of this. Let's see the before and after. And yeah, you can see those tones have started to look really nice. So I'm not really going to cover the face right now. Let's just quickly work on the neck and the chest. Okay, so let's do this again, doing it in a bit of a bulk. Oops, I want to move this. Let's select a bigger area. That should be fine. Control Command F. Yeah, looks good. Finally, let's do it on this. Though this is pretty smooth, to be frank, but let's just do it. This time, what I'll do is I'll not repeat the process. I'll just go to Gaussian blur because I don't want to put too much there. So because it's already smooth, right? So you can just too much. Okay. Oops. So this, maybe this part a bit. Spread it out. Control Command F. Yeah, this is fine. But I don't want to also lose the shape which the shadows give to the body. Okay. You also have to be careful when you do this process. Don't lose the shape on the face, the jawline, and the different parts of the body. Also, I like to use it a bit on the hands. I'm just going to do this again in a big area. Like this whole transition where the highlights are turning into shadows. This part. Yeah. This is a bit annoying. Sometimes I can't find that end. Okay. Control Command F, and that is just smoothing things out. Okay, and we want to do it on this hand. Okay, that's just one final part. Let's just do this. F, that is fine. Right, so now we look at this, slightly zoom out. Let's compare this with the original. So can you see? Even at such a zoomed out stage, you can clearly see the big difference in the tones. Would probably like to even do it on this part because when you zoom out, sometimes you can see which are the tones which are slightly uneven. You can clearly see maybe it needs a bit of work here, maybe a bit on the hand here because I was not too strong on the Gaussian filter. I had changed the value here. Maybe a bit of it here. I think we are good to go. You can even apply it sometimes on the clothes, okay? No, not recommended. And I think this is looking fine. Now, I just want to show you that this is not the end of it because you can clearly see Kush. When you zoom in, this looks too fake. Don't worry about it, okay? Because what you can do now is that, let's say, I open up a new group. So you can create like a group, and inside a group, think of it like a folder. You can actually put layers. So let's put these two layers. Whatever we did with frequency separation, let's actually put these two layers inside. So I'm going to put the texture layer. I'm going to put the color and tone layer. Now, can you see this is like a subset of it? It's just gone inside this group. There's no difference. Okay. And I can even close this group. And let's say I can call it double click and I can call it FS, frequency separation. Now it kind of looks much better. So see, without FS, with FS, without FS, with FS. Okay. Now is the time that you can, if suppose you say at this point, because this is too much, no problem. What you simply do is, this on a separate layer, you can turn down the opacity. See, if I decrease the opacity of this, we go back to our original. Let's say I felt, you know what, just went overdone that a bit. Okay, no problem. Set it to around 50%. So then we're not doing too much, just doing this much. Maybe you really want to be very realistic. Some people are like that. So this, personally speaking, I actually love to be a bit heavy on this, okay? Because I've always seen my clients like it, you know? Even though in the photography world, if you say that, like photographers, you know, they just criticize you a lot. You're going for a fake look, but it's been my experience, and my clients always love this smooth look. So I give them whatever they want, you know? And but again, it's a subjective issue, but that's a separate topic. So I think, like, let's say around 80% looks fine. And even after this is something I want to show you, okay? Because remember, I was not happy with this part. Even after this, remember, we always have a layer mask to work with. Well, that can really allow us to localize things. So what I can do here is, let's say if I, on this, you can open up a layer mask on a group also, okay, on a group layer. So I can open up a layer mask, let's say a white layer mask. So it's going to reveal the group right now fully. But wherever I don't want this effect, what I can do is I can take my paintbrush, make sure I take black, okay, and let's say I decrease the opacity a bit so that this is like really subtle. But let's say now if I start painting on this layer mask, I just want to take away a bit only from it because I didn't like it. Maybe this was too strong. So I can just start to paint with less opacity, just a bit here, just a bit, tiny bit. Can you see like this little thing comes here? That's just telling us that, okay, now you're seeing a bit of it from the down. So now it's much more closer to that part. And this way you can really fine tune the final result as per your needs, whether you want it to be realistic or you're okay with a really, really smooth look also. So this was frequency separation. I know it was a bit technical. Well, that's how it works. With practice, you will get it for sure. I'll see you in the next image. Bye for now.